There exists a quiet ache that lives in the space between who you are and who the world expects you to be. It's the feeling of standing in a crowded room, surrounded by laughter and conversation, yet experiencing a profound sense of disconnection that you cannot name. You watch others move through life with an ease that feels foreign to you, as if they possess an instruction manual you are never given. This isn't sadness exactly. It isn't loneliness in its traditional sense. It's something more elusive, a persistent awareness that you exist slightly outside the rhythm of ordinary life. You feel different, but when pressed to explain why, words dissolve before they can take shape. The difference lives in your bones, in the way you process the world, in the questions that arise naturally in your mind while others seem content with simpler explanations. This is the psychology of those who carry an invisible otherness, a difference so fundamental. It shapes every interaction, every relationship, every quiet moment of self-reflection. It begins in childhood, though you don't have words for it then. You're 7 years old, sitting in a circle during story time. And while the other children giggle at the silly voices the teacher makes, you find yourself wondering about the sadness in the characters' eyes. You notice things that seem invisible to everyone else, the way shadows fall differently in the afternoon, how certain songs make your chest feel heavy, or how adults' faces change when they think no one is watching at recess. You stand at the edge of the playground, not because you're shy, but because something about the chaos feels overwhelming. The laughter is too bright, the games too simple, the social rules too confusing. You want to join, but you don't know how to bridge the gap between your inner world and theirs. When you try to share what you're thinking about the clouds that look like they're carrying stories, or the way the swing set creaks in a rhythm that sounds lonely, other children stare at you with blank expressions. You're weird, someone might say. Not with malice, but with a matter-of-fact certainty of childhood. And in that moment, something crystallizes. You are different. But different how? Different why? This awareness follows you through the hallways of middle school, where fitting in becomes a currency you don't possess. You watch your classmates navigate social hierarchies with an ease that mystifies you. They seem to understand unspoken rules, to share common references, to find joy in things that leave you feeling empty. You try to mirror their enthusiasm for pop songs and gossip, but it feels like wearing clothes that don't fit. In high school, the distance becomes more pronounced. Your peers are concerned with weekend parties and romantic drama, while you find yourself drawn to deeper questions. You read philosophy in your spare time, not to seem intellectual, but because it's the only place you find words for the thoughts that keep you awake at night. You have friendships, but they feel surface level, built on shared activities rather than shared understanding. The difference isn't just social, it's perceptual. You notice the micro expressions that flash across people's faces before they compose themselves. You feel the emotional temperature of a room the moment you enter it. Violent movies make you physically ill, not because you're squeamish, but because you can't separate yourself from the suffering on screen. Music doesn't just sound pleasant or unpleasant. It tells you stories, evokes memories that aren't yours, creates entire emotional landscapes in your mind. You learn to translate yourself for others. When someone asks what you're thinking about, you offer the simplified version, the one that won't make them uncomfortable or confused. You develop a social persona, a way of being that feels manageable for those around you. But beneath this carefully constructed exterior, your true self remains largely unseen. The unnamed distance follows you into adulthood. In work meetings, you find yourself analyzing the subtext of every interaction, while your colleagues focus on spreadsheets and deadlines. At dinner parties, you're drawn to the person sitting quietly in the corner, sensing their discomfort, while others gravitate toward the loudest voice in the room. You form fewer but deeper friendships, always wondering if your intensity is too much, if your questions go too deep. If your way of processing the world exhausts the people you care about, dating becomes particularly complex. You connect with people on profound levels quickly, perhaps too quickly. You see through their facades, recognize their wounds, understand their fears before they voice them. But this depth can feel overwhelming to partners who are still learning to navigate surface-level intimacy. You find yourself dimming your perceptiveness, pretending not to notice things you clearly see, learning to love in a language that isn't native to you. The difference isn't always painful. Sometimes it's a gift, the ability to comfort someone who is struggling because you genuinely understand their pain, or to create something beautiful because you see the world through a unique lens. But the gift often feels heavy, like carrying a responsibility you never asked for. At night, when the world is quiet, the unnamed distance feels most acute. You lie in bed wondering if everyone feels this disconnected, or if it's just you. You question whether your perception of your own difference is real or imagined. You wonder if there's something fundamentally wrong with you, or if there are others out there who experience the world in this same deeply felt, inexplicably complex way. The distance isn't about superiority or inferiority. It's about existing in a different emotional frequency, processing life through a different filter. It's about carrying an inner world so rich and complex that finding someone who can truly understand it feels nearly impossible. This is where the journey begins, in the recognition of an unnamed distance that has shaped every relationship, every choice, every quiet moment of wondering if you truly belong anywhere at all. The seeds of feeling different are planted long before conscious memory begins to form. In the earliest days of life, some children arrive in the world with nervous systems that register everything more intensely. They are the babies who startle at sounds others barely notice, who cry not just from hunger or discomfort, but from the overwhelming sensory experience of simply existing. Their parents often describe them as sensitive or difficult, not understanding that this child's brain is processing 10 times more information. Quran's research on highly sensitive people reveals that approximately 20% of the population is born with a trait called sensory processing sensitivity. These children notice subtleties in their environment that others miss: the slight change in a parent's tone, the scratchy texture of a shirt tag, the emotional tension that fills a room during an argument. For them, the world is not just louder and brighter. It's infinitely more complex. But sensitivity is only one thread in the tapestry of otherness. Some children are born with minds that work differently, brains that make connections others don't see, that find patterns in chaos, that ask questions no one else thinks to ask. These are the children who learn to read before they can tie their shoes, who become fascinated with death and meaning at age 5, who see mathematics as poetry and find profound beauty in scientific theories their peers won't encounter for decades, particularly the kind that manifests as emotional or intellectual intensity, can create a profound sense of isolation. Gifted children often develop what psychologists call asynchronous development. Their emotional, intellectual, and social growth happens at different rates. A 10-year-old might have the philosophical concerns of a college student, but the social skills of a 7-year-old. They exist between worlds, too mature for their peers, but too young for the adults who might understand their thoughts. And there are the children who feel different because their earliest experiences taught them that the world isn't safe. Trauma, even subtle forms of it, can wire a young brain for hypervigilance. These children learn to read every micro-expression, to anticipate every shift in mood, to become emotional radar systems scanning constantly for threat. They develop an uncanny ability to understand others' psychological states. Empath children discover their otherness through an overwhelming capacity for feeling. They don't just observe others' emotions, they absorb them. A friend's sadness becomes their sadness. A parent's anxiety floods their small body with worry they can't name. They cry during commercials about hungry children, feel physically ill when witnessing conflict, and carry the weight of others' pain as if it were their own. These children often learn to hide their empathy because it's too much for those around them to understand or handle. Some children feel different because their brains are wired in ways that don't match societal expectations. The autistic child who finds social interaction exhausting but can lose themselves for hours in the patterns of leaves. The ADHD child whose mind moves too fast for traditional learning but who sees connections and possibilities others miss. These neurological differences aren't deficits. They're variations that create unique ways of experiencing reality. Family dynamics play a crucial role in shaping the experience of otherness. The child who is significantly different from their siblings, the quiet one in a family of extroverts, the intellectual in a family that values athletics, the artist in a family of practical thinkers learns early that their natural way of being doesn't fit their primary environment. They may be loved, but they're often not truly understood. Sometimes otherness emerges from being parentified, forced to become emotionally mature too quickly due to family dysfunction, mental illness, or trauma. These children become the caretakers, the ones who learn to read adult emotions and manage adult problems before they've had a chance to be children themselves. They develop wisdom and empathy beyond their years, but at the cost of a lost childhood and a persistent feeling that they're different from their peers who are allowed to remain innocent longer. Cultural and social contexts also contribute. The child of immigrants who exists between two worlds, never fully belonging to either. The child whose family's values differ dramatically from those of their community. The child who questions religious teachings that others accept without examination, or who feels deeply connected to spiritual concepts their family dismisses. Physical differences can also create psychological otherness. The child who develops earlier or later than their peers, who has a disability or chronic illness, who looks different from their family or community, often develops an acute awareness of being outside the norm. This physical otherness can lead to emotional and social otherness, creating layers of difference that compound over time. What unites all these origins is the early development of what might be called observer consciousness, the ability to step outside one's immediate experience and observe both oneself and others with unusual clarity. This observer self-develops as a survival mechanism, a way of navigating a world that doesn't quite make sense in conventional terms. The tragedy is that many of these children learn to see their differences as flaws rather than variations. They internalize messages that there's something wrong with them rather than recognizing that they're simply experiencing human existence through a different lens. They spend years trying to fix themselves instead of understanding themselves. But within these origins of otherness lie the seeds of profound gifts, the capacity for deep empathy, unusual creativity, spiritual insight, and the ability to see truth where others see only surface. The very traits that make these individuals feel different are often the same. Traits that allow them to contribute something unique and necessary to the world. Behind every feeling of inexplicable otherness lies a complex interplay of neurology, psychology, and biology that science is only beginning to understand. The brain that processes the world differently isn't broken or deficient. It's simply operating with a different architecture. Like a house built with unique blueprints that creates a completely different living experience. Neuroscientist Dr. Elaine Aron's groundbreaking research on highly sensitive people reveals that these individuals have brains that process sensory information more deeply and thoroughly. Using functional magnetic resonance imaging, researchers have discovered that highly sensitive people show increased activation in brain regions associated with awareness, empathy, and sensory processing. Their brains literally work harder, taking in more information and processing it more completely than average person, this deeper processing happens in several key areas. The insula, a brain region responsible for internal awareness and empathy, shows heightened activity in sensitive individuals. They're not just imagining that they feel others' emotions more intensely. Their brains are actually more active in the regions that process emotional information. The visual cortex also shows increased activation, meaning they're not just being dramatic when they notice subtleties others miss. They're genuinely seeing more detail in their environment. The research extends beyond sensitivity to other forms of neurological difference. People with what psychologists call intellectual giftedness often have brains that form connections more rapidly and extensively than average. Their neural networks are more complex, with increased white matter that allows for faster communication between brain regions. This enhanced connectivity can lead to the kind of rapid, complex thinking that makes gifted individuals feel out of step with others. But this enhanced processing comes with a cost. The highly sensitive brain also shows increased activity in areas associated with stress response. The amygdala, the brain's alarm system, is more easily activated in sensitive individuals. This means they're not being overly dramatic when they feel overwhelmed by stimuli that others find manageable. Their brains are genuinely perceiving more threat and processing more information, creating a state of heightened arousal. Recent advances in neuroscience have also illuminated the role of neurotransmitters in creating different ways of experiencing the world. Some individuals have variations in how they process dopamine, the neurotransmitter associated with reward-seeking and stimulation. Those with lower baseline dopamine may need less external stimulation to feel content, preferring quiet contemplation to busy social environments. Others may have differences in serotonin processing, affecting their mood regulation and social bonding patterns. The autism spectrum provides another lens through which to understand neurological difference. Autistic individuals often have brains that process information in more detailed, systematic ways. They may notice patterns and connections that neurotypical people miss entirely. Their supposed deficits in social communication often stem from processing social information in a fundamentally different way. Not wrong, just different. Many autistic individuals report feeling like anthropologists studying human behavior from the outside, a perspective that can provide profound insights into social dynamics that others take for granted. ADHD represents another form of neurological variation that can create feelings of otherness. The ADHD brain often has differences in the prefrontal cortex and dopamine pathways that affect attention regulation. But what looks like distractibility to others may actually be a brain that notices more, processes more, and makes connections more rapidly. Many individuals with ADHD report feeling like their minds move too fast for the world around them, creating a sense of being fundamentally out of sync with others. Trauma also creates measurable changes in brain structure and function. The brains of individuals who experienced early trauma often develop heightened threat detection systems. The amygdala becomes hyperactive, while the prefrontal cortex responsible for rational thinking may become underactive. This creates individuals who are extraordinarily attuned to emotional nuance and potential danger, but who may struggle with the kind of logical, linear thinking that society rewards. Interestingly, many of these neurological differences overlap. A person might be highly sensitive, gifted, and have experienced early trauma, creating multiple layers of neurological variation that compound their sense of being different. They're not just one thing. They're a complex constellation of traits that interact in ways science is still working to understand. The concept of neurodiversity has emerged as a framework for understanding these differences not as disorders, but as natural variations in human neurology. Just as biodiversity strengthens ecosystems, neurodiversity may strengthen human societies by providing different perspectives and abilities. The same traits that make someone feel isolated or misunderstood may also make them exceptionally creative, empathetic, or insightful. Asterisk research in epigenetics has revealed another layer of complexity. Environmental factors can actually change which genes are expressed, meaning that sensitivity, giftedness, or other traits can be influenced by life experiences. A child with genetic predisposition towards sensitivity might develop these traits more strongly in a chaotic environment, or might learn to suppress them in a family that doesn't value emotional awareness. Asterisk, the mirror neuron system, discovered in the 1990s, helps explain why some people feel others' emotions so intensely. These specialized brain cells fire both when we perform an action and when we observe others performing the same action. In highly empathetic individuals, this system appears to be more active, creating a neurological basis for the experience of feeling others' emotions as if they were your own. Asterisk default mode. An ETWORK research has revealed that some brains are more active during rest, constantly making connections and processing information, even when not focused on a specific task. This might explain why some individuals report feeling mentally exhausted even during supposedly relaxing activities, or why they have rich inner lives that feel impossible to share with others. What emerges from this scientific understanding is a picture of human consciousness as far more varied than once believed. The brain that feels different isn't malfunctioning. It's simply running different software on different hardware. These neurological variations create genuine differences in how reality is perceived and processed, validating the subjective experience of feeling fundamentally different from others. This scientific framework doesn't diminish the emotional impact of feeling different, but it provides crucial context. The otherness isn't imagined or chosen. It's built into the very structure of the brain and nervous system. Understanding this can be the first step toward self-acceptance and finding others who share similar neurological landscapes. Living with an invisible difference is like carrying a secret that shapes everything but can be shared with almost no one. Unlike visible differences that invite understanding or accommodation, the internal landscape of feeling fundamentally other remains hidden, creating a peculiar form of isolation that's difficult to name and harder still to explain. The exhaustion begins early and runs deep. It's not just physical tiredness, though that exists too. The nervous system constantly processing more information naturally leads to fatigue. It's the emotional labor of translation, of constantly converting your internal experience into something digestible for others. Every social interaction requires a kind of simultaneous interpretation, taking your complex, nuanced thoughts and feelings and rendering them into the simplified emotional vocabulary that others understand. You learn to speak in emotional shorthand. When someone asks how you're feeling, you say fine, instead of attempting to describe the intricate web of emotions, observations, and sensations actually moving through you. When a friend shares their problems, you offer simple, supportive responses rather than the multi-layered analysis that naturally occurs in your mind. This constant self-editing creates a growing distance between your authentic self and the version you present to the world. The masking becomes automatic over time. You develop personas for different situations. The work self, who appears competent and untroubled. The social self, who laughs at jokes you don't find funny. The family self, who pretends not to notice the emotional undercurrents everyone else seems determined to ignore. Each mask serves a purpose, allowing you to function in environments that weren't designed for your particular way of being. But masks are heavy, and wearing them constantly creates a form of identity fragmentation. You begin to lose touch with who you actually are beneath all the adapted strategies. The real you, the one who notices everything, feels deeply, asks uncomfortable questions, and processes life in rich, complex layers, gets buried so deep that sometimes you wonder if that person still exists. The loneliness of being misunderstood takes a unique form. You can be surrounded by people who care about you, who think they know you well, and still feel profoundly alone. They love the version of you they can understand, but that version feels like a performance. The parts of you that feel most essential, your depth, your sensitivity, your different way of seeing, often remain invisible to even your closest relationships. This creates a painful paradox. The more authentically you show up, the more likely you are to be misunderstood or rejected. But the more you hide your true nature, the more isolated and disconnected you feel. You find yourself caught between the pain of rejection and the pain of invisibility, never quite finding a comfortable middle ground. The self-doubt becomes relentless. In a world that seems to operate on frequencies you don't naturally emit, you begin to question your own perceptions. When you notice tension in a room that others claim doesn't exist, when you're overwhelmed by stimuli that others find pleasant, when you're moved to tears by beauty that leaves others unmoved, you start to wonder if your reality is valid. The constant message, spoken or implied, is that your experience is too much, too intense, too complicated, too sensitive. You develop what might be called reality dysphoria, a persistent doubt about whether your internal experience matches objective truth. Did that conversation really have the subtext you detected, or are you reading too much into things? Is that person actually struggling beneath their smile, or are you projecting? Is your emotional response appropriate, or are you being overdramatic? The lack of validation for your perceptions creates a chronic uncertainty about your own judgment. The phrase, "you're too sensitive," becomes a particular source of pain because it invalidates not just your reaction, but your entire way of experiencing life. It suggests that your depth is a flaw rather than a trait, that your capacity for feeling is a weakness rather than a strength. You may try to toughen up, to care less, to react more like others do, but it feels like trying to change your eye color through sheer willpower. Relationships become especially challenging because your way of connecting feels foreign to many people. You want to go deep quickly, to understand someone's fears and dreams and wounds, to connect on levels that transcend small talk and surface pleasantries. But this intensity can overwhelm people who are comfortable with lighter connections. You learn to ration your depth, to parcel it out in smaller doses. But this feels like starving an essential part of yourself. The professional world often feels particularly hostile to your nature. Workplaces that value efficiency over empathy, results over process, confidence over thoughtfulness can feel like environments where you must constantly suppress your natural instincts. Your tendency to consider multiple perspectives might be seen as indecisiveness. Your awareness of emotional dynamics might be dismissed as irrelevant. Your need for meaning and purpose might be viewed as idealistic or impractical. You may find yourself successful in conventional terms, achieving career milestones, maintaining relationships, appearing to function well while feeling like you're living someone else's life. The success feels hollow because it's based on your ability to perform normalcy rather than your authentic strengths and interests. Constant vigilance required to navigate a world that doesn't quite fit your nature creates a state of chronic stress. Your nervous system, already more sensitive than average, becomes further heightened by the ongoing effort to adapt and belong. This can manifest in physical symptoms, headaches, digestive issues, insomnia, immune system problems, as your body bears the cost of psychological adaptation. Perhaps most painfully, you may begin to see your difference as a burden rather than a gift. The traits that make you uniquely capable of deep empathy, creative insight, or spiritual understanding get reframed as problems to be solved rather than qualities to be celebrated. You may spend years in therapy trying to become normal instead of learning to honor and work with your authentic nature, the weight of invisible difference is the weight of carrying a truth that few can see or understand. It's the exhaustion of living between worlds, the loneliness of being surrounded by people who love a version of you that feels like a costume, and the grief of wondering if you'll ever find a place where your authentic self is not just tolerated but truly welcomed. Yet within this weight lies the seed of transformation, the recognition that the problem isn't with your nature, but with a world that has too narrow a definition of what it means to be human.